So now I seen our Dean School of Education, Professor Ashish Srivastava, has joined the meeting now, and our HOD, Dr. Mukesh Kumar, also here.
Welcome.
Hi.
Good evening, all of you. Welcome, Professor Maurice, sir.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Mr. Manish Kumar. Mr. Manish Kumar.
Yes, sir. I'm audible, sir.
Okay, please start timely.
Okay, sir. With your permission, now I go ahead and start the program.
Ask to Manisha, ma'am.
Manisha, ma'am. In few minutes, sir, our program will be start.
Shall we start or we wait for 4 minutes, sir?
Sir, sir permitted to
Okay.
start the program.
Okay, Dr. Manisha, please start timely. I
Okay.
think 1 minute.
Dignitaries and participants, dear scholars and students, a pleasant good morning and good evening to all from wherever you are connected. We welcome you all in this international is based in Noddings, Care Apps and Pedagogy, Reimagining Education, organized by Department of Educational Studies, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, India. So let's begin the program with an auspicious prayer devoted to Goddess of Knowledge, Goddess Saraswati. For the prayer, now I would like to invite Ms. Suprabha De, Doctoral Research Scholar, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, India. Suprabha, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, Suprabha.
Yes.
Ya
Suprabha, your sound is little bit vibrating.
Okay. Suprabha. Ya kundendu tushar har dhavala, ya shobhra vastra vrata, ya veena varadanda mandita kara, ya shweta padmasana, या ब्रह्माच्युत शंकर प्रभृतिभिः देवै सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा शुक्लां ब्रह्म विचारसार परमा आद्यां जगद्व्यापिनी वीणा पुस्तकधारिणीमभयदाम् जाड्यान्धकारापहाम् हस्ते स्फाटिकमालिकां विदधाते पद्मासने संस्थितां वन्दे त्वं परमेश्वरी भगवती बुद्धिप्रदां शारदां बुद्धिप्रदां शारदां बुद्धिप्रदां शारदां. Thank you. Over to you, Manisha ma'am.
Thank you, Suprabha. Thank you so much for such a beautiful offering to Goddess Saraswati. Now, moving ahead, I would like to request Head Department of Educational Studies, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, India, Dr. Mukesh Kumar, sir, for welcome address. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Manisha. Good evening, all of you. Thank you for being with us today on the occasion of international seminar on Noddings on care ethics and pedagogy, reimagining education, organized by Department of Educational Studies, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, East Champaran, Bihar, India. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere regard to Professor Anand Prakash, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, East Champaran, Bihar, India, for giving opportunity to organize that event. And I would like to express my sincere welcome to Professor Maurice Hamington, Professor of Philosophy and affiliated faculty of Women, Gender and Sexuality Studies in Portland State University, Portland. Professor Maurice has authored more than 15 books, as well as many book chapters and articles on the subject of care. I heartily welcome you on the behalf of Department of Educational Studies, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, East Champaran, Bihar, India. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Ashish Srivastav, Dean, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, East Champaran, Bihar. Welcome, sir. I welcome all deans, heads, faculty members, and administrative officers of the Mahatma Gandhi Central University, East Champaran, and all participants who joined us today. Again, I pleasantly welcome all of you on the behalf of Department of Educational Studies, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, East Champaran, Bihar. Thank you. Jai Hind. Over to Dr. Manisha.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this blissful welcome address. Now, due to some urgent academic assignments, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, could not join us right now. So moving ahead, now I would like to request Dean, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, India, Professor Ashish Srivastava, sir, for inaugural address. Sir, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manisha Rani. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, thank you. So at the outset, first of all, let me extend my apology due to some urgent assignment. I am traveling and right now I'm sitting at airport, taking shelter in one shop so that I can share, I can be with you. So thank you so much. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Mr. Maurice Devakar and all the research scholars and students for arranging such a wonderful event at Mahatma Gandhi Central University virtually. Department of Educational Studies, School of Education of this emerging university feels immense pleasure in welcoming our Vice Chancellor, Professor Anand Prakash ji in absentia. I express my heartfelt thanks for all his support for this event. Presence of all senior faculty members from Mahatma Gandhi Central University is making our happiness manifold. Thank you so much for being with us. I welcome all my colleagues, the head of the department, Dr. Mukesh Kumar, Dr. Rashmi Srivastava, the convener of this program, Dr. Manisha Rani, Dr. Patla Tomkar, all the research scholars, students, and learned audience. My dear friends, today is a great day. Can you mute yourself, please? Thank you so much. So today is a great day when we are welcoming a wonderful professor and authority on the issue. Today's keynote speaker, Professor Maurice Hamington, professor of Portland State University in United States of America. Honestly speaking, I am touched by the humility of our guest today, Professor Maurice Hamington. I welcome you, sir, on this virtual dais with a belief that we may host you physically someday in our university campus at a historical piece of land, that is Champaran. Thank you so much, sir. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you. I love that.
I will not say much on it as Mr. Manish Devakar, a dedicated, hardworking scholar of Mahatma Gandhi Central University, is going to share in detail. Manish is working on this issue in his PhD thesis. Entire credit for the program goes to Mr. Manish Devakar and his supervisor, Dr. Rashmi Srivastava, and entire team of Department of Educational Studies. Fortunately, sir, let me share with you, Department of Educational Studies has a good team of research scholars. Since Manish has asked me to inaugurate, so I'll be fulfilling the formality only. My dear friends, my dear colleagues, we all know that Neil Noddings' work and explorations of the ethics of care and their relationship to schooling, welfare, and to learning and teaching within families and local communities appeared at an appropriate moment. Neil Nodding could demonstrate, if you can. Sorry. Both. Can you hear me? It's showing some
Yes,
internet.
sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fine. Okay, so Neil Loading could demonstrate the significance of caring and relationship both as an educational goal and as a fundamental aspect of education. As a result, if you look, Neil Loading's work has become a key reference point for those wanting to reaffirm the ethical and moral foundations of teaching, schooling, and education more broadly. Her work has included analysis of caring and its place in ethics. Like if you can refer caring, so caring, feminine approach to ethics and moral education, 1984 and 2013. And if you look at her attempt to rethink evil from the perspective of women, that is Women and Evil, 1989, and you will be finding a series of books that have explored the implications of a concern for caring with education. For example, if I quote here, The Challenge to Care in Schools, 1992, Educating Moral People, 2002, 2002, Happiness and Education, 2003, etc. Neil Loading has also sought to encourage people to engage philosophically with education. And in this context, the researches on care education as being done by Mr. Manish Divakar is of high importance. I am sure to receive different perspectives and a detailed understanding on the issue by today's learned keynote speaker, Professor Maurice Hamington. I again congratulate all the scholars, all the students, all the colleagues from the School of Education, from Mahatma Gandhi Central University for creating such a wonderful momentum and academic environment at this very new and young university. I welcome our highly learned guest once again and request all the audience to take out best from this event. Wish you all good luck. Thank you one and all. Thank you so much. Over to Dr. Manisha Rani.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this insightful address by you. And thank you so much, sir, for laying foundation of this program. Now moving ahead, as per Neil Noddings, student is infinitely more important in compared to subject matter. So with these lines of Neil Noddings, now I would like to invite Mr. Manish Kumar, doctoral research scholar, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, India, for introducing the theme and introducing our guest of this event. Manish, over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm audible?
Yes, you are perfectly audible. Carry on.
Thank you so much. As we know that the theme of the today's discussion and presentation, reimagining education. We all human beings want care in their life because we are contextual, not individual and alone. Our Indian civilization is very good example of caring and well-being of whole mankind. Our Asian chants proclaimed that like this: Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashantu Ma Kashid Dukh Bhag Bhavet. It means let all human beings be happy, let all human beings be well, let all human beings see well-being of others, let no one suffer for unhappiness. It sees the whole humanity as one human family, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Our National Education Policy 2020 proclaimed to infusion of Indian knowledge system in education, which is based on these components such as sacrifice, tolerance, diversity, writers' conduct, gender sensitivity, respect for elders, respect for elders, respect for all people their inherent capabilities regardless of background, and democratic outlook, integrity, and equality and fraternity. But the question is that how we will inculcate these virtues on our coming generation, in our coming generation. Here, care pedagogy will help us, because Nodding said that education is the best way of cultivating of caring element within coming generation. When we look in society, the root cause of serious problem today's society, such as crime, emotional disattachment,
Recording in
depression,
progress.
and moral degradation, is depending on these three fundamental questions. We do what we do want for our children. Second is, what do they need from education? And third is, what does our society need? The popular response of this question is that the students need more academic training, that the country need more people with greater mathematical and scientific competence, that's a more adequate academic preparation will save people from poverty, crime, and with evil of current society. But the ground reality is just opposite. As we are getting educated, the crime, suicide, and depression rates are increasing rapidly. The reason behind it that we are missing something very important to cultivate into children's, the upcoming generation. That's why nil loadings indicate toward these problems, saying that our society does not need those types of children who qualified exam in good grades, but it needed to caring people to reduce violence, to respect honest work of every kind, to reward excellence at every level, to ensure a place for every child and emerging adult in an economic and social world, to produce who can care competently for their own families, contribute effectively to their communities. So, if we want to make this world beautiful, then our main educational aim should be to encourage the growth of competent, caring, loving, and lovable people. And happiness should be the aim of education. Happiness should be the aim of education, and a good education should contribute significantly personal and collective happiness. To address these, it is essential to ensure that three things should be in every human being. First is that a human holistic world vision, the feeling of relationship, love, compassion, and care for each other, is skill to actualize the holistic world vision in Indian quotation Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The philosophy of care education focuses on man making education. Care education not advocates to produce man forces like robots, but an individual who know to be happy in real sense and ready to elevate the misery around us. In the holistic of care model, the aim of education is centered around happiness in
Mr. Manish,
Sir,
you are
you are
muted.
muted.
now I'm
Kindly
audible.
unmute, Manish. Yeah,
Okay,
now
okay.
it is okay. Go ahead.
Okay. In ethics of care model, the aim of education is centered around happiness. Incorporating this component into education involves not only helping our students understand the component of happiness by allowing teachers and students to interact as a whole community. In regard to the education of the whole child, Nodding state that we will not find the solution of problem uh, alienation, ignorance, and unhappiness in increasing our security, imposing more test, punishment, punishing school for their failure to produce 100% proficiency, or demanding that teachers gain knowledge in subjects they teach. Instead, we must allow teachers and students to interact the whole person, and we must develop policies that treat the school as a whole community. Nell Loading scare theory is prominent plan for restoration and excellence resource for building relationship within the school system. It also give a understanding of what it means to be a teacher. Nell Noddings explain her theory as care ethics from rational standpoint. To know more and more about the intellectual legacy of Nell Noddings, the particular focus on care education, and to know more about her life and work, explore the infusion of care theory in education, care and curriculum, pedagogy and classroom culture, teaching component of care model, and the domain or themes of care. I would like to welcome Professor Maurice Hamington. Professor Maurice Hamington is a professor of philosophy, Portland State University, Oregon, USA. He is a care ethicist interested in both the theory and application of care. He has authored or edited several books, including Care Ethics, Religion and Spiritual Tradition, with Inge von Nistelrooy and Maureen Selder-Stout. Care Ethics in the Age of Precarity with Michael Flower. Care Ethics and Poetry, authored with C. Rosenau. Care Ethics and Political Theory with Daniel Egester. Applying Care Ethics to Business with Maureen Selder-Stout. Socializing Care with Dorothy C. Miller, Embodied Care. He is currently working on the Oxford Handbook of Jane Addams with Patricia Seal and Joseph Scotter. Dr. Hamington is currently a Fulbright specialist. Now we are very feel fortunate to find such a great personality with us. Once again, I would now request Professor Maurice Hamington for their presentation. Over to Professor Maurice Hamington.
Thank you so much, Manish, and thank you so much to everybody. I would like to express my gratitude to the Department of Educational Studies at Mahatma Gandhi Central University. It's an honor to speak to this excellent university named for one of the great figures of the modern world whose words continue to inspire us. In particular, I'd like to thank Chief Patron Professor Anand Prakash, Director Professor Ashish Srivastava, the convener Dr. Mukesh Kumar, the coordinator Dr. Rashmi Srivastava, who oversaw the work of Mr. Manish Kumar, who has been really wonderful to work with in preparing for this talk. So I am in this presentation. I'm going to do a few things. And you can see this on the screen. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Good. I'm just going to say a few more things, a little bit about myself, but then also I'm going to talk about Nell Noddings' life and career, and then to talk about her as the founding mother of care ethics. And entailed in that, I'm going to look a little bit at the chronology of her works and some of her selected terms in terms of care ethics. And then I'll turn my attention to Noddings on care and education, including her books, The Challenge to Care in Schools, Beyond Teacher Knowledge, The Quest for Wisdom, A Richer, Brighter Vision for American High Schools. Nell Noddings wrote and made so many presentations, it would be impossible to cover all of her material in one presentation, but because she was very prolific. But we'll try to get a flavor for her work. Also, at one point I have a short 6-minute video of her speaking, so there'll be a little bit of a technological transition when we get to that point. All right, and I should say that even though we're going to be talking about her care ethics and her teaching or her work on education, I have them separated here. They're actually quite integrated to one another, because her her philosophy of care really informs who she is. All right, so I had the chance to meet her in 2015. Let me just okay. Oh yeah, I wanted to say a little bit about who I am. Okay, so Manish already introduced me, professor of philosophy at Portland State University. I also am affiliate faculty in women, gender, and sexuality studies. I've been involved in feminist theory and feminist philosophy for a long time. It was in graduate school that I was first introduced to the work of Nell Noddings, and when I got my first PhD in religious studies, and I got a second PhD in philosophy, and a master's degree in business and a graduate certificate in women's studies. And all along, Nell Noddings was a very important part of that. So I've been exploring her work for about 25 years. There's a picture of my family and also a few of the books that I've produced on care. So it was Nell Noddings' book, Caring, which first got me interested in care ethics in the early 1990s. It was one of the very first books on the subject, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. I consequently started to correspond with her. I sent her emails, and she was always very approachable, very gracious in allowing me to ask her questions. And she contributed to two of my own books chapters when I first wrote Socializing Care, and then Care Ethics and Political Theory. Even though I was very much a junior scholar, she was always willing to participate and willing to help. And then in 2015, I had the opportunity to be on a panel of individuals who was honoring Nell Noddings and her work in front of her. She was there, and at this meeting of the North American Society for the Advancement of Social Philosophy. And again, she was very giving of her time, very wonderful to be with, and it's fantastic to see somebody who writes so much about care to be so very caring. So let's talk a little bit about her life and her career. She grew up in a working class family on the East Coast and worked her way through a state college. She married her high school sweetheart. They had 5 children of their own, 5 biological children, but then they afterwards they adopted 5 additional children from a number of different nationalities. And more than that, there were at least, she was a very open person in terms of her family, so there was at least 3 other people who became part of the family, not necessarily formally adopted. And so, she counted approximately 13 amongst her children. Her academic career spanned over 6 decades, and across her life, she loved mathematics. She studied mathematics, and that's what she taught in school, in secondary school. She also served as a school administrator in New Jersey and as a teacher educator. Her entire family relocated from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast of the United States so that she could attend graduate school at Stanford University. And she was an outstanding student studying both philosophy and philosophy education when she was at Stanford. And she returned to Stanford to in an academic position. But before she got there, she went to the University of Chicago and was the head of the laboratory education school that had originally been founded by John Dewey, which is an interesting connection because she honors the work of John Dewey so much in her own work. She earned tenure and promotion and at Chicago, and then at Stanford, actually, when she moved to Stanford, and directed their teacher education program. And she gained national and international recognition as a philosopher and philosopher of education, but she was also a dean at Stanford. She was the graduate and dissertation advisor for dozens of students and was influential to many, many people like myself and many of you. She was the president of many national academic societies in the United States, including the prestigious National Academy of Education. She was awarded several honorary doctoral degrees, and she retired back in 1998, but she continued to write many books and articles afterwards. It was a great tragedy when she passed away this last November, and Manish and I had scheduled this prior to her passing, and it only makes this a little bit more poignant in that she is no longer with us. But she's left us a great legacy in all her books and her articles and her presentations. One marker of how beloved she was is that in 2012, a book came out called Dear Nell. And this is a book of letters, over 50 letters from academics, family members, former students, writing about how influential Nell Noddings was. Here, I just want to read a couple of the statements about Noddings. One is from one of her daughters, who also became an educator. And she said, "Mom's vision for our shared profession has always been clear and centered around caring for lifelong learners and helping all realize their full potential." And this is, this is something that's shared by everybody about how much she cared. Another letter is from Kathy Hitton, who was the president of the American Education Association and an education professor. And she said, and she's writing this letter to Nell, she says, "No doubt you are most well known for your work on caring. I love the way you extend the idea of caring into so many different domains, not only for people both far and near, but for the environment, for things, and even for ideas. In my 14 years as a professor, I have found that it is the relationships I develop with students, especially through dialogue and confirmation." These are two of Noddings' words we'll talk about a little bit later. That matter most to them, not the material I teach. Even when I feel overwhelmed with work, I try to remind myself to keep my office door open frequently, to be present for students, to genuinely listen to them, and to respond to their needs as best I can. Too often, students experience schools and universities as impersonal, unresponsive bureaucracies, not as welcoming communities. I am convinced that changing this reality would go a long way toward creating more, quote, competent, loving, and lovable people. Finally, I love the fact that you devoted a whole book to happiness in education. If there's one thing we all want in life, it is to be happy. And I'll talk a little bit about that book as well later. But all of this is very indicative of Nell Noddings' philosophy. She wanted schools to be open and not bureaucratic or cold and distant places. And then finally, just another letter from Tianlong Yu, a professor from China, and she says, I see a need to redefine moral education at this historical moment. Those of us busy with investigating new approaches, models, theories, or ideas that aim to fix the kids, not the environment, may want to take a break. It is time for us to work together to create and sustain an environment that allows the moral life to flourish. It is not my so wild imagination that if we had a moral school where the child's moral character is adequately nurtured and fostered, we would not need any separate additive moral education program. So again, Noddings will see moral education as part of all education, and that's what this person was getting at. So that's a little bit about Noddings, a very long career, very prolific career, and these are some images just of a few of her books on the screen. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about her major theoretical contribution, and that is on care ethics. First, I just wanted to give you, in case you haven't been exposed, I know we have some important care scholars here, and we got in the introductions, a number of these books were mentioned, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a chronology of a few publications. Now, in 1982, a book was published not by Nell Noddings, but by Carol Gilligan. It's this volume in a different voice, and you can see it's not a very thick book, but this is considered one of the modern founding texts of what is called care ethics, and I always want to be a little bit careful about that. This is, care ethics as it is commonly understood today. Of course, there are many cultures, many societies, many ancient societies and indigenous cultures that understand care very deeply in a way that those of us in the Western world have not understood it so well. But this text did kind of introduce this to us in 1982. And Gilligan was a developmental psychologist. And so her approach was very much from that standpoint in trying to understand the development of children, the development of boys and girls. And she focused on the fact that we ignore a certain voice in morality, and that's the care voice. And that's why the title of the book is in a different voice, because it's about this missing approach to morality. Shortly thereafter, 2 years later, in 1984, this book comes out, Caring, with a long subtitle, A Feminine Approach to Ethics and Moral Education, from Noddings. And this is Noddings' first major venture into this area. And what I often say about this time period is that the idea of care and a relational morality was kind of percolating in society. It was out there, and then Carol Gilligan and Nell Noddings gave this idea a name and moved it forward. But Nell Noddings actually only refers to Carol Gilligan's work in like one citation in the book. She really developed the idea kind of separately, and a lot of people were thinking this way at that time. So, and from the title of the book, you can begin to see how she ties care ethics to moral education. The two always go together for her. They're not entirely separate concepts. In 1993, Joan Tronto, a political theorist, wrote the book Moral Boundaries, and Joan Tronto is considered the first person to take the high idea of care ethics and give it a kind of political flavor, putting it instead, while the early work of Noddings and Gilligan focused in on individual relationships that we have, Joan Tronto was the first person to focus it outward and think about the political and the social sphere. in terms of care, and how we might change our political practices and policies to be more caring. But Noddings did not ignore the political either. So in 2002, she writes the book Starting at Home. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this book later, but it is also an attempt at thinking about society and how what we might learn. The reason it's called Starting from Home is what we might learn from our homes that we should apply in politics, in government, and in society at large. In that same year, you can see how prolific she is. She is turning out book after book after book. She writes the book Educating Moral People, and in that book, she also she starts to talk about an alternative to character education, because there was a movement, at least in the United States, maybe elsewhere as well, to have a separate kind of caring education. Like, we're going to sit down for a few hours and talk about morality and character. And she said that that's fine and good, but really the caring morality should be taught throughout the curriculum, throughout our pedagogy. It should be embedded in the whole thing. And then just a year later, she comes out with Happiness and Education. And this is a thoroughgoing look at happiness, going back to Greek and Aristotelian ideas of what happiness is, and bringing it up to the present and saying that we don't really focus in as much as we should on the happiness of our students, the happiness of our profession as teachers, and how we can integrate those. In 2005, The Challenge to Care in Schools. Here she's directly addressing what she sees as bad trends in higher education in the Western world, of standardized testing, too much of that, too much memorization and rote concerns, and not enough on the relationships involved. And then in 2010, remember, she retired. Just keep in mind, she retired from teaching in 1998. So you can see how many books she's writing after retiring. She writes The Maternal Factor, where she talks about two paths to morality. And she repeats a theme that she has in other places, that a lot of our world has taken on a very masculine approach to ethics and morality, and that maybe we should look at the undervalued voices of women, and she offers a more feminist approach to thinking about morality. Again, these are not all of her books. I just wanted to give you a little sense for the sweep of her writing, as you know, and how it was advancing. Okay, so I want to play a short video, and I will need to stop sharing this for a second, and let's see. And I need to share. Where'd it go? Oh, I lost my screen here. Where'd it go? Here, Zoom. Come on, let's go back to Zoom. Oops. Sorry, little technical difficulty here. Okay. Okay, share screen. I just want to share a different screen. Share this screen. And in order to, let's see. Okay. Sorry. I wanted to make it bigger. Lost my, okay. Stop. Okay. So all right. I just want to make this big. Okay. Too many. I'm trying to manipulate too many screens here. Okay. This. Now we'll do this. And now I will share that screen. Okay, very good. Okay. So this is just a short clip just to give you a flavor. She's going to start to talk about some of the terms in of care that I'll be mentioning in a second. So let's play this. Oh, I have to go back. Okay, here's the beginning. Okay.
Sir, it's not audible, sir.
Professor, it is not audible, Professor.
It's not coming. It's not coming through.
Professor, it is coming, but the voice is not audible.
Oh, it's not audible. You can't hear it. Oh. I'm sorry. So you couldn't hear that at all?
No, Professor, no. Since
No,
beginning,
sir,
we could
no.
not hear anything.
Oh, I apologize. Okay.
No,
I guess.
Professor, you can play, Professor, again.
Oh, but I don't know that I can make it audible. I wonder if I should move on. So you can't. I don't know how to make it so you can hear it. I thought it would just come through to you. So let me well. Okay, well, I apologize. I will just I'll just move on, I think. So that
Yes,
we don't get.
Professor. You can, Professor. You can also share the link in the chat box, Professor, so it will be helpful to all the audience, all the esteemed
Okay.
participants.
Okay. All right. Okay, sorry about that. Let's so I need to let me go share my okay, let's put this back into full screen here, and I will share I'll share this. Okay. Oh wait. Is it sharing the right screen? Are you seeing the PowerPoint?
No, no, Professor, no. We could see your.
You are sharing successfully, but not any PPT in the screen.
Okay, let me try again. Share. Okay, so now you see it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Again, I'm very sorry about that. Oh, now it's now. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. Very good. Now we got it. But that's one too far. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Nell Noddings' view on care ethics, and first talk about the word care itself. According to Noddings, care is the most important value, and that's the most important relational value. She says, as human beings, we want to care and be cared for. Caring is important in itself. Care requires action on behalf of others. It's more than just a disposition. Sometimes we say, I care about this, or I care about that. And for Noddings, care is more than that. You have to actually do something. And when you do something, it is not merely to care by some kind of fixed rule or some kind of calculation, but you're acting out of affection and regard for the other person. And it's always for a particular person in a concrete situation, and not a kind of generalization. But for care, for Noddings, care is the starting point for everything. So the caring relation then, and that's what she was going to talk about in that video that didn't work out. It is relationships, not individuals, that are ontologically important. So in philosophy, I don't know if you know this word ontology, but it's the study of being, what we are, our inherent self. And in care ethics and in Noddings, there's the concept that we human beings are relational beings, as opposed to autonomous individuals, which has been the favored approach by much of Western philosophy. And she pushes back against that and says that relationship is what we basically are. Some care theorists even talk about the fact that we are all second persons, that there is no such thing as an individual who develops outside of a relationship. We all rely on others. We are the sum of the aggregate of all of our relationships, whether it was, with family, with friends, work, all of that comes into play in determining who we are. And so when it comes to care ethics, it's a relational morality. She says, as a relational ethic, care ethics begins its thinking as life itself begins in relation. We do not start with the individual adult moral agent. Right from the start, we are concerned with the caring relation, from the briefest encounters to long-term associations, and we describe the roles of both care and care for in establishing and maintaining that relation. So that's a very important concept, and maybe it doesn't sound like it's too radical of an idea, but in compares, if you think about Kantian ethics or utilitarianism, so forth. Those are all very individualistic by comparison. She also makes a distinction between natural caring and ethical caring, and this is to get at the idea of proximity, basically. So for Noddings, caring for our family and our friends, the people who we are familiar with, the people we love, that is an easy kind of caring that she refers to as natural caring. That doesn't mean that sometimes it's not challenging or difficult to care, but it seems to come more naturally for us. The ethical caring is the kind of caring where we extend beyond our family and our friends to others, to distant others, to people who are less familiar to us. And that can be a lot harder. We're not always as comfortable with those other people. We don't always understand them. We don't necessarily share as much with them. And so it takes more work to do it, to expand the circle of care beyond those people we are familiar with. And she thinks that we need to draw upon our experiences of natural caring to so that we can engage in more and better ethical caring. She says, ethical caring's great contribution is to guide action long enough for natural caring to be restored and for people, once again, to interact with mutual and spontaneous regard. So, when we meet a stranger, we're at the stage of ethical caring. We're trying to understand them. And hopefully, in time, and with being, with them, it'll become more a natural kind of caring. We'll become more comfortable with that caring. Another key idea for Noddings is attentiveness. And this is where we really focus on individual others and try to learn about them and get to know them better, which can lead to greater caring. In fact, she, in her early works particularly, would use the word engrossment in terms of caring. We are engrossed in the other because we want to know about them. And caring and knowledge go hand in hand. I often like to refer to care work as knowledge work, because the more we know about somebody, the more the potential, not always, but the more the potential is to care about them. Conversely, the more we care about somebody, the more we want to know about them. And so they kind of go hand in hand with one another. For Noddings, this kind of attentiveness comes with a certain humility, because you have to really be present to the other and not make assumptions about the other and what you imagine they might be like. It's a kind of deep or active listening to the other. And the other concept is that goes hand in hand with this is being present to the other. When we're present to the other, that means we are spending both time and we are also near them. We're having proximal knowledge of them. And presence can be a very powerful thing. She refers to it as this I am here disposition in her works. I am here for you. I am here present to you, listening to you. And that's a way not only to show care, but it is a way to build up the knowledge necessary in order to care better. She was also going to talk about in that video motivational displacement, where instead of me being motivated by my needs, I am so engrossed, I am so attentive to the other, that I am now trying to think about their needs and putting my self-interest aside. So the flow of motivation goes to other people and their projects. Now, that said, I want to make it clear that caring is not altruism in the sense that I still have to care for myself. I don't empty myself out completely. One of the early criticisms of feminist care ethics was that it would continue the history of oppression toward women who were always asked to be altruistic, to be only for their family and not for themselves or their own development. And care is not that way, because to be a good caregiver, you have to take care of yourself first, which makes particular sense if you think of us as relational beings, because in caring for myself, I am caring for somebody else as well. I am putting myself in a better position to care for somebody else. But if we are all second persons, if we're all relational, then caring for myself, in a sense, is a way of caring for others. I'm not talking about being selfish. I'm just saying about caring for the self. Another idea that's important for her is the notion of express needs. Care ethics is oriented toward needs rather than rights. Okay, again, she's differentiating herself from the work of a lot of moral philosophy in saying this, and then looking at needs. And she express needs are the needs that people are asking for, that they want, that they are able to articulate. And she distinguishes this from assumed needs, because assumed needs are what we imagine somebody might need. And we might be right and we might be wrong, or we might be somewhere in between if we just work off of assumed needs. Assumed needs are often a kind of generalization. For example, as teachers, we might assume the needs of our students based on our experience. And so we bring some of our ideas about how to care for them from our assumptions about their needs. But until we talk to individual students, until we engage them, we don't know what their expressed needs. And so there's a possibility that we might not be entirely correct if we just worked off of assumed needs. Also, there's the potential for us to engage in paternalism, whereby we are really imposing what we think care is on them. Care is a word that historically isn't always a positive word. Colonial powers often use the word care for people when they're using that really to oppress the people that they were over. Also, sometimes people do very violent things to other people in the name of caring for them. But this is not the kind of care that Noddings is talking about, the ideal of care. This is paternalism run amok, when we're not really considering what individuals need. And so related to that is the idea of responsiveness. It is a hallmark of care that we are responding to the others in their need, in their particular circumstances, as best that we can. She talks a great deal about reciprocity and mutuality. In this sense, she's talking about reciprocity, not in a formulaic market exchange kind of way, like one for the other, but in a more general kind of, we reciprocate, we take care of each other. We are interdependent beings, and so we must mutually care for one another. And this is the kind of reciprocity and responsiveness that she is talking about. She says care and cared for are not impermanent labels, but names for roles accepted in particular encounters. So, I could be cared for in one moment and then caring for somebody else in the next moment, or I could be doing both at the same time. These are very dynamic kinds of concepts. She distinguishes a little bit between caring for and caring about. Caring for someone is the face-to-face occasion in which one person cares directly for another, the cared for. This is the best kind of caring, but we can't always do that for everybody. And so sometimes our ability is limited, and we have to care about people at a distance, if there's something else going on in the world, and maybe and then we want to care about them because they're going through some kind of tragedy, and maybe eventually circumstances will change so that the caring about can be transformed into caring for. Doesn't always happen, but because we just physically can't care for everybody, but it can be the basis for how we think about a just society, for a more caring society, through that more distant caring about. So I mentioned her book, Starting at Home. This is here she extends the personal to social policy. She reverses the Platonic notion of building the ideal caring home of model to the ideal state. So the ancient Greeks thought of the family should be modeled off the ideal state. She's saying reverse this. There's a lot that we can learn from our homes, from the morality in our homes and how we treat each other in our homes, that can be applied to society. So she says, ideal homes universally provide protection as well as shelter, offer an adequate supply of material resources, encourage growth, have at least one adult who does the work of attentive love, and educate for a form of acceptability that is simultaneously adapted to and critical of the culture standards in which the home is located. One of the examples that she gives is forgiveness is a big part of the home. We don't permanently vilify or ostracize family members when a transgression occurs, and she thinks that society should figure out ways to do that as well. Let me see if I. I had a few. Okay, well, okay. So, this approach, you will see when she talks about education, mirrors that as well, because she's going to say some of the values, some of the relational ideas that come from the home should also be in the classroom. She says an ethic of care, private and public, works to create a world which is both possible and attractive to be good. And so she's always making a connection between the local and the universal, what she's experiencing directly and what's going on in the world. So for her, her contribution to philosophy, moral education, and the ethics of care is tremendous. And it was a great loss when she passed away. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more directly about care and education specifically. But again, it's not entirely separate from her philosophy of care ethics. She says, my contention is first that we should want more from our educational efforts than adequate academic achievement, and second, that we will not achieve even that meager success unless our children believe that they are themselves, are cared for, and learn to care for others. So even though she was not a psychologist like Carol Gilligan, Noddings recognized how central our need to care is. And we also have this kind of natural impulse to care for others. And we need to foster that in children. And education can be really a part of that. For Noddings, again, the two spheres are not separate. She uses, when she's talking about care ethics, she uses a lot of metaphors from teaching. And teaching becomes one of the quintessential places for understanding what care is. Noddings agreed a great deal with John Dewey in the notion of associated living as crucial for education and democracy. And this idea, associated living, is a very relational kind of concern, where we're working with one another in dialogue, in cooperation to achieve goals. She says Dewey insisted that students must be involved in the construction of objectives for their own learning, that they must seek and formulate problems, not simply solve ready-made problems, that they should work together in schools as they would later in most workplaces, and that there is an organic relation between what is learned and personal experience. So here you can see that there is not the as great a hierarchy or distance between the teacher and the student, as they both work together on the curriculum and what's important into study. And that gets the students to be much more engaged with it if they have a more direct connection to it. But Noddings is clear that even though she admires Dewey, she feels that she's going beyond Dewey. In particular, Noddings thought that that Dewey was too invested in the traditional subjects, the content of education. She says, much of what I recommend is compatible with Dewey's thinking, but I go considerably beyond him in advocating new priorities. She thinks that care is both a education methodology, but it is also part of the content of the curriculum. So it is both. And it's funny because Dewey was a philosopher who often questioned the distinction between ends and means. And in this particular case, he doesn't so much in education. And Noddings comes along and says, ends and means are not quite as distinct as we think. But because to care is a way to, is both a means and an ends. For example, when we really listen to somebody, we're trying to learn something about them that we can use to better care for them. That's how we care for somebody better, if we understand their situation better. But in the process of caring, of listening to them, of being attentive to them, that process, that methodology, they also, in that process, feel cared for. So the ends and the means are a little bit more entangled than one would normally think. So in that book that I briefly mentioned before, the challenge to care, in schools, Noddings describes schools as poorly situated to respond to the modern needs of society and students. Too much emphasis on standardized testing and standardized curriculum. I don't know what it's like in India, but in the United States, there's this emphasis on what is measurable and productivity, and Noddings thinks that ignores the relational. Caring needs to be infused throughout the educational experience, and she gives a couple of different ways of doing that. One is that faculty need to model caring, and so they need to demonstrate to students how they care. A long time ago, I wrote a book called Embodied Care, and my point in that book was that as physical beings, as embodied beings, we are both subject and object. We can see ourselves and reflect on ourselves at the same time. We perform care physically in the world. Remember, Noddings said that care is an action. So students in a classroom will see the instructor and see how they treat other students, how they treat other teachers, and so forth. And in that witnessing, they are modeling care for them that students will capture, not just intellectually, but in their bodies, because our bodies have this ability to capture experience. There's a colleague of mine who even talks about what's called kinesthetic empathy, where we our bodies can empathize with others. So modeling is very important. And then dialogue. She already mentioned the fact that she thinks that students should be involved in developing the curriculum, but students need to be respected in dialogue. It gives them a sense of being cared for, and that engagement manifests their relational being if it's through caring, through dialogue. So she says caring is the very bedrock of all successful education, and that contemporary schooling can be revitalized in its light. That's a very powerful statement, and that's why I think what Mahatma Gandhi Central University is doing is so tremendous. There are most universities that I know of in the United States would not put on a program about caring in schools the way that you're doing here. And there's a lot of resistance to that, a lot of neoliberal thinking that says that, that we should diminish our emotional and empathetic connections. And so Noddings is going in the exact opposite direction. And that's why I commend you for putting on this seminar. In this book, she argues that the traditional liberal education as understood in the United States is not enough. Too emphasis on narrow forms of rationality and abstract reasoning, and it's too compartmentalized with people going to these very specialized classes. She thinks that remember she was a math teacher in high school. She thinks that even in math you could be modeling caring and talking in teaching that in such a way that it demonstrates caring. And so that would be true in all courses. She thinks that students learn best in a caring community, and she says that she has this notion of concentric circles of caring that should be imparted to students. Caring for the self, those who are close to us. We already got that. The self-care, the natural caring, that those are close to us. Strangers and distant others. The ethical caring, but also animals, plants, and the earth, the human-made world, and ideas. And so that's where schools come in, right? So there are people there who are learning together, but learning together about ideas, and they're caring for one another and caring for ideas, and those things feed upon each other and support one another. That quote I forgot to mention was on my opening slide. The student is infinitely more important than the student. I put that on every one of my syllabi for my students. I think it's such an important concept. Maybe not so much in India, but in the United States, we have a lot of very ego-driven professors who think that their subjects are the most important thing, but they forget sometimes how important students are. She concludes the challenge to care in schools with a checklist for education planning. She says, be clear that the goal of education is to produce competent, caring, loving, and lovable people. That's the quote we keep coming back to. And if you keep that central, then everything else can flow from that. There, in one of her books, she says, if someone were to ask me if I had a choice between having my daughter be a top student and get all A's, or being a caring person, she would always pick the caring person as more important. What if the world was filled with very caring people? What would it be like? So she says that we need to keep that educational goal clear. Take care of affiliative needs. Keep the students and teachers together as much as possible. Again, the relationships. So she wants sometimes you know, K through 12 schools can be very compartmentalized. And she says that students and teachers should be able to develop relationships with another over a period of time. Care has a temporal dimension to it. It has a proximal, a physical dimension to it, but it also has a temporal dimension, and that students should be kept together as much as possible. She says, relax the impulse to control and try to give more power to students, including self-evaluation. I have taken this to heart myself, and there is a movement afoot, and I've joined this movement where in my university classes, I have the students grade themselves at the end of the term. There are some check and balances there. I give them rubrics and systems for it, but I try to show them respect and get them to own their own education and engage their own education by allowing them to grade themselves. Eliminate program hierarchies, be inclusive, let the students explore their interests. This is really tough in the United States. Education is higher education in universities is very expensive, and so students are usually told to just go to school to get a job, and they can't really explore a lot of outside interests. But she says how important that is to let students have some control in that way. Make a part of every day given over to themes of care. That we really need to be one way to value care more in our society is to talk about it more, to reflect on it more, to make it more part of our lives and to engage it. And then she says, teach students that caring in every domain implies competence. When we care, we accept the responsibility to work toward understanding. Care is not funny, it's the fuzzy, it's the backbone of human life. And so if somebody is a great physicist, well, they really care about the work, and that can flow from people who care for them. All students in all fields usually can say, was there a teacher that inspired you, that were that particularly struck you? And what is it that they usually say about that student, that faculty, that they cared about them? One of the themes that comes out is that students will long remember the faculty member who cared about them beyond what they actually taught them, the specifics of what they were taught. Now, this is not something I've mentioned before, but this is an article that she wrote from 1993. I've been focusing on her books, but she wrote many, many, many articles. And she praises Socrates because he sought wisdom rather than today's quest for the control of knowledge. She suggests three aspects of this quest for wisdom. One, know thyself. Students should have the opportunity to analyze their own work, habits, and intellectual interests, the conditions under which they do their best work, their motives for doing or failing to do schoolwork, their loyalties and prejudices, and of course, their vision of their best self. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to work at the University of Verona as a visiting scholar in Italy. And they had this wonderful program for elementary school students where they were getting them to explore and understand what their feelings meant. Like when they felt mad or when they felt ashamed, they would try to understand these feelings and reflect upon these feelings. And it was a program designed for children their age. And this is, I think, a great way to know thyself, because when you can understand your emotions as a child better, you can understand other people's notions of emotion, and you can understand their actions better and why they may act in a certain way if you can understand their those emotions better. And I thought this was a brilliant program, and they did quantitative research on it. It was proving to be a very effective program for these students in knowing themselves. Her second area, the good life, students need to explore more than occupational skills. They should get a glimpse of what it means to pursue a good life in context of trust, where the teacher shares something of their own quest. So yes, of course, it's important to get a good job, but we are all more than just our jobs, and we can enrich students' lives by allowing them to intellectually explore things. And then finally, the eternal questions. No matter what subject is being taught, students should be allowed to explore the big questions that matter to them. So this is the philosopher in her coming out to her. Even when you're just teaching something like math or something that seems very like a very specific kind of field, that doesn't mean you can't talk to students about it, how it fits into bigger questions, about life, the purpose of life, what's going on, those kinds of big metaphysical questions that come out in philosophy. So in many ways, this is very much the Socratic approach to philosophy that we need to live, the examined life, and that's what she's getting at here. And then there's another book that I haven't mentioned before, A Richer, Brighter Vision for American High Schools, that she wrote in 2015. Again, remember, she retired in 1998. Noddings calls for a unifying goal of education, fostering better adults. And here she offers the 7 C's in service of this aim: choice for faculty and students in curriculum and assignments, critical thinking, weigh complex arguments, listening respectfully to interpretations and recommendations, and concentrating one's own argument. And I should say that her notion of critical thinking is much more expansive than simply a rational abstract approach to critical thinking. She thinks that the relational is a big part of critical thinking. Caring, the crucial relation for learning, connections among the disciplines and to life, continuity of purpose, subject matter, place, and people, collegiality, the notion of shared responsibility, and creativity necessary for reimagining a relational and engaging educational vision. I haven't said much about imagination, but underlying a lot of care work is our imaginative world. We need to imagine what the other person's experience is. That's the empathetic connection that we make to others. But we also need to imagine what our response should be in particular educations. Now, our imaginations need to be checked by knowledge. Our imaginations can be wrong, but if we are constantly engaged in humble inquiry, we're improving our ability to imagine the plight of others. She says, I have emphasized choice as the stimulus for creativity, connectedness to generate meaning, critical thinking to promote democratic participation, collegiality to define and execute our plans, and continuity to support relations of care and trust. So I'm not exactly sure. Let's see how. I think I'm done a little bit early, but that's the presentation that I have. And just to repeat the thing that's been said over and over again, the main goal of education should be to produce competent, caring, loving, and lovable people. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. If you want to see some of my other works and presentations, you can find it at mhamington.com. Some of the things are available open access, so you can actually get a few, like the recent book from last year, Care Ethics, Religion, and Spirituality. All of those are freely available to anybody who wants them for downloading. And you can find that at mhamington.com. Also, I'm putting up my email address. I do correspond with students and other faculty all over the world. And if there's something I can do that could be useful or helpful to you, feel free to email me. But now Manish, I think we have time for questions and answers.
Yes, Professor. We have time. We can have discussion, Professor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Professor. You excellently and wonderfully covered all the related aspects of care ethics and pedagogy, like natural caring and ethical caring, engrossment, humility and deep listening, presence, reciprocity, and mutuality with reference to caring, caring for and caring about, caring community, circles of caring, caring home, and 7Cs in very systematic and organized way. Sir, your thought-provoking and enlightening deliberation definitely help us in developing deeper and better understanding regarding the theme. And along with this, it will help us in articulating parts of our role well as a pedagogue and considering new aspects of caring with relation to pedagogy and education. Thank you so much, Professor. Now moving further with the lines of Neil Noddings, education by its very nature should help people to develop their best self. And we think it is possible only by this care ethics and pedagogy. With this, now I would like to invite Dr. Patlo Dhomkar, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, to take up the question answers from our participants. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Humble greetings, Professor from India, Champaran. Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for being with us this evening. I place my sincere pranam to everybody, all the respected colleagues, scholars, and students. So now I would like to invite for question answer session from the esteemed participants. We can have two ways. One, either kindly you can unmute and one by one you can ask the questions, or either way you can drop your questions in the chat box. So Professor, we have received 3 questions in the chat box. Can we take up those questions, Professor? As per your concern, Professor, how would you feel free?
Yes, we can go in any order. I'll just need some help finding if you could
yes, Professor.
Which question?
I could. Yeah, Professor. The question number 1 from Himansi. The question is, Professor, is there any relationship between care and emotional maturity as per Neil Noddings' philosophy?
Well, I think that's a very good question. And I think we are the argument I made in embodied care is that we have bodies that are built to care, that we have the capacity to care, and we learn about care from a very young age. We know in our bodies what care is, even before we have speech, even before we have the ability to articulate it. We know what it is to be cared for. That's not to say that some people aren't, abused and so forth as children, but we know what it is to care. And so, in terms of maturity, it just depends on how we mature. We can develop those skills, better. And I think Noddings' program of education is one way where we get more exposed to what care is. We see it modeled. We talk about care. It becomes part of the curriculum. And so that can contribute to a kind of more mature, deeper understanding of it. The care ethics is never formulaic. And so we have to it is in that sense, it's kind of hard, it's kind of difficult. We have to develop skills in order to be good carers, and that takes a certain kind of maturity. And so when we develop listening skills that Noddings talks a great deal about, that is one step in that kind of maturity that that can improve care. So they go hand in hand. And I do want to say something that I think it's important to remember, that and this fits with the maturity question, that care is I think best thought of on a continuum rather than a binary of care, not care. So that you know, there are some kinds of activities that are low level of caring for one another, like maybe a simple greeting is is caring, but it's not a deep kind of caring, and it can become something much deeper, more complex if we spend more time and we have more skill at it. So the maturity, I think, takes us from that from let's say a thin understanding of care to what can be a deeper understanding and enactment of care. I don't know if that was a good answer, but
thank you. The question was from Himansi. Professor, now I would like to invite a madam. Madam is the name, it is in some Chinese name, I think. So sorry, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am,
it's
yes.
Teresa. Sorry, this is Teresa.
Ma'am,
Teresa.
Teresa, very happy to have you, ma'am. Could you please unmute, ma'am? You can ask directly question to Professor Hamington.
I wrote on the message. How about the Virginia Health and Michael Sloat? They also wrote the book about the care ethics. How do you think about them? Because you didn't mention about them. You mentioned about the Toronto, someone else, but that didn't mention about this because they wrote a book about the care ethics.
Yes, I can pull those books out. They're right over here. So yes, Virginia Held was a very important early adopter of care ethics. We only had so much time, so I didn't mention everybody. She also, like Toronto, she focused on thinking about it more in social and political terms, as opposed to individual relational terms. And Michael Sloat is a very interesting case. I have worked with Michael Sloat on occasion. He was a rather well-known virtue ethicist who was so attracted by care ethics that he now writes exclusively on care ethics, and he's written a number of books on it. And he argues that Michael Sloat argues that in a more standard kind of way, care ethics is a normative theory of morality, which means that it can help you decide certain situations, what to do. And he says that's all based in empathy. So his important word was empathy. He had a dialogue with Nell Noddings, because Nell Noddings at first did not like the word empathy, and Michael Sloat kind of convinced her that empathy was okay. What Noddings' concern is that we would project ourselves onto somebody else, and therefore the empathy would be more of a reflection of ourselves as opposed to the other person. And but that can be checked with humble inquiry. If you're you're imagining somebody else, you're empathetically imagining them, and then you ask them questions, if you're still deeply attentive to them, and you're starting to drift in the wrong direction in your imagination, the humble inquiry, the attentiveness, can bring you back kind of to a better understanding. So
thank you.
Okay.
All right, other questions?
Yes, Professor. Professor, one more question from Paritosh Anand. The question is, in the context of India, caring sometimes creates problem for teachers, specifically with female students. How to deal with it? Suppose, Professor, go ahead, Professor.
Do they want to ask their question directly and talk a little bit more about the context?
Yes, Professor. Paritosh Anand, are you in the call?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can directly ask Paritosh to the professor. You can ask your question directly. Unmute yourself and kindly ask the question.
Okay, I just wanted to ask that sometimes showing care to the students is talking specifically about female students. Sometimes they misunderstood with something else, especially talking about rural India and the colleges in there. So how to deal with that to not the cross the boundary of caring and creating any scene or any problem with them.
Okay, so I'm assuming you're talking about male faculty to female students. Is that correct?
Sir, yes, yes.
So the one thing about caring is it's very contextual and situational, and so you'll have to figure out within the Indian context what is exactly acceptable. That's the thing about care ethics. It doesn't provide rules. It's not like a Kantian duties or anything like that. So so you'll have to navigate that, but certainly there are ways to demonstrate care that shouldn't have any other kinds of implications to it, especially if one is earnest in that approach. But that's probably a question that somebody from India should answer, rather than me, because I have never taught in the Indian context. But certainly, I have taught, female students in the United States, and you can, and there are, there are certain boundaries of behavior even here. Maybe I'm sure it's very different in India, and you can still show concern for them. You can still give them voice. You can still empower them and respect them without implying any other pretext. That's the best I can do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Paritosh. Yes, Shivam Tripathi, are you in the call? We have one more question from Shivam Tripathi, Professor. Okay.
Meanwhile, I have one question. Can I ask?
Yes, ma'am, definitely. You can.
So one question from my side, that Noddings always talks about philosophical engagement with education. So how can we, or what are the probable ways for engaging the students philosophically with this education? So,
can you explain a little bit more? I'm not sure I understand the question entirely.
So, my question is, Noddings talks about philosophical engagement with education. So, in relation to students, what are the probable ways, or in which manner we can engage the students philosophically with education? Philosophical engagement in relation to students. How can we inculcate or develop such kind of?
Well, I think again, I'm not exactly sure if I'm on the right track here, but I think that if there's an opportunity to remember that Noddings says care should be part of the curriculum as well as the as well as a methodology. And so if you can teach them about some of these ideas regarding care. That's kind of the philosophy of care, the intellectual basis for why care is important in our lives. That I think could be part of the framework that students, operate from. If they, if like some of this vocabulary that Noddings talks about in terms of responsiveness, attentiveness, reciprocity, if that becomes part of the even a small part of the curriculum for the students, then they'll have that kind of philosophical basis that can match their what you're trying to do in the classroom in education. Again, I'm not sure if that was a very good answer, but that's what I have.
Thank you, Professor. Now I would like to invite Ms. Suprabha De. Suprabha, you can unmute and ask your question to Professor.
Thank you, sir. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
At the onset, thank you so much, sir, for such a comprehensive and informative lecture that you delivered. It was really edifying. And my question is, it is somewhat similar, a little bit similar to what Manisha ma'am asked just before me. Actually, I really wanted to ask that we are in a world of machine learning or artificial intelligence, or we can say we are in a world of education 4.0 or industry 4.0. So everything is getting so mechanized or computerized. In higher education, we are seeing that students are more concerned in reskilling and upskilling themselves, or the education system is getting so mechanized or computerized, we can say. So how can we infuse the ethics of care in curriculum so that we can make that thing relevant even now? The point I want to make is that we do not want students to get so mechanical into their works. There should be that humane or caring part awake in themselves. So how can we reimagine a curriculum or methodology so that we can infuse that in making them more concerned about this, the ethics of care? Over to you, sir.
All right, very good. Okay, excellent question. And by the way, that was a beautiful prayer. You have a beautiful voice. Thank you for that in the opening. It's true. In fact, I attended a couple of years ago, I attended an international meeting at Stanford University where the subject was technology and care. And I subsequently advised a PhD student who now has her PhD, who her dissertation was on care and artificial intelligence. And so there's a growing interest in this field. And from what I've seen, I think the important thing to remember is that this technology, and whether it's it's artificial intelligence, all the different kinds of computerization and so forth, it's important, but it's a means, not an end. And I think sometimes that gets confused. And so people focus on it as a good in itself, but care is the good in itself, and these should be tools. And so the work we did with discussing, for example, robotics in healthcare, was that these robots don't actually deliver care. They are tools for people to deliver care. And the same is true for technology and so forth. It's not, you're not going to learn about care. Care needs to be the central focus from these. But they are tools. They are neutral. They are like the computer screen you're looking at right now. They're not they're instruments and not the thing itself. But sometimes the world gets really excited about technology and treats it like it is the goal of education. and it's not. The goal of education, and this is why we have to speak out and say the goal of education is to make, good, caring, lovable people. That's, what the goal needs to be. One of the things that I write about is about progress, and it's an interesting concept, because when you talk to people in general about progress, they will usually talk about technological progress, scientific progress, economic progress, but what they won't talk about is moral progress. It's never usually much of a subject. And I think care is a way for us to make moral progress, because it is not fixed, it is very relational, and you have to imagine empathetically somebody else's situation and how to make it better. Then care is a way to make, moral progress. But again, technology and those kinds of things seem to get a lot of people's attention. And I think as educators, we have to use technology properly. I'm not against technology. Obviously, I use technology, but it is not an end of itself. Our work is in helping people to be fulfilled in their lives, and that includes caring.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor. Soumya Jaiswal, are you with us? Soumya Jaiswal?
Hello. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes,
I'm there.
yes, ma'am. You can ask your question directly to the professor, ma'am.
A very good evening to sir and all the faculty members and organizing team. Sir, actually, I have a question that is based on Nell Noddings saying that to care is to act not by fixed rule, but by affection and regard. I have question on this, that how this care system will work for organizational development, as organization has several rules and regulations.
Sure. That's very true. And care ethics is not against rules, but in terms of morality, what Noddings is saying is that morality is more than rules, and those rules are kind of like a shortcut when it comes to issues of morality, and the hard work of morality is to care, is to be attentive to other people, to understand them, to connect with them, and then to be responsive in acting on their behalf. So you're right, this is very difficult from an organization standpoint, and organizations do have to operate by certain rules. However, that doesn't mean that we have to entirely remove the humanity from those organizations, and that we can't infuse care in them. And there's, again, a lot of these political theorists, like a Joan Tronto, like a Virginia Held, like a Dan Engster, and many others, are writing about how to make society, organizations, institutions more caring, within their scope. So to give you one example, when I first came to Portland State University, for the first 4 years, I was an administrator. I oversaw our general education program, and I had 200 faculty that reported to me in this general education program. And I set about doing this in a way that I made it clear to everybody that the value was going to be care. That I had workshops and seminars, and we talked about care. And I tried in all of my dealings with everybody in the institution to approach it from a caring standpoint, to really try to understand where they're coming from. Now, that didn't exempt them from difficult decisions that sometimes for them did not feel like they were caring, but working within the parameters that I was allowed to work within, I tried to bring as much, care to the situation as possible. And I think that's what institutions can do, is where possible, put in spaces for there to be care, put in the flexibility as much as possible for individuals to care. And even if it's not entirely possible, to strive for it to be more possible in the future. So so that's the other thing I like to talk about care I think of it as a process theory. Care ethics is a process theory where we're always in process of getting better. And so, yes, institutions are a big challenge. They're very highly structured sometimes. There's all kinds of limitations, but there should always be some wiggle room, some liminal space for there to be for caring to try to flourish within the structures.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
So,
Kanai Sarkar? Yes. Yes,
so
ma'am.
can I ask?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So I want to ask that if you know any methods or how ethical practices or ethical care can be practiced in organizational or institutional settings.
It's one thing to keep in mind is that institutions, in essence, don't care for you. It's the people in the institutions that can care for you. Institutions can either assist, create opportunities for caring, or they can get in the way of caring. What I could recommend to you, if you want to email me, is I can send you some, maybe I can give you some articles about people who are writing about organizations and caring. There's in English speaking business ethics journals, there's actually quite a few articles about care ethics in them. So people are trying to figure this out. It's obviously an ongoing problem.
Okay, so I will mail you my context of questioning, and I hope
Ma'am, we will request Professor to drop his Professor's email ID in chat box after the program, so you can communicate, Professor, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Kanai Sarkar for his question. Kanai Sarkar, you can unmute and ask.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Directly.
Namaskar, Professor. So I'm Kanai Sarkar, research scholar, Mahatma Gandhi Central University. Sir, I have a question. Suppose we are discussing here about the caring education in the context of the pedagogy. So, sir, my question is that how can we implement in the field of teacher education, where our prospective teachers can develop an attitude when they will go for the classroom, and so that they can implement the caring in the school classroom. So, like some model, some method, how can prepare our teachers, prospective teachers?
Okay, I think I understood the last part of the question. There was a little bit of interruption in the technology, but how do we prepare educators? I think some of the same ideas that Noddings talks about for students would apply there. And so if you're preparing teachers to be more caring teachers, one is you'll have to model it for them. so that you create a culture of care at your institution and amongst the School of Education, so that they feel they can actually see that care. And having seminars like this and having regular discussions about care on an ongoing way to demonstrate how important it is, I think is an important step. We in the program that I oversaw, one of the things we did was we rewrote some of the mission and the vision of our program so that the language of care was embedded in it. Again, a symbolic to show people how important it is. And then, of course, you have to build in care practices into the actual content of the courses. Whether you have a whole course on care or it becomes a part of many courses that you teach. This next term I'm going to be teaching a course on the philosophy of care in my school, but I also talk about care in all of my classes, and as I say, I try to practice care with my students in all my classes. So it's elevating attention to it and making it really a part of the culture. I think are important steps in preparing them to go out and replicate that care in the schools that they go to. I don't know if that answered all of your question, because I don't know if I heard the first part very well. So if you want to follow up, you can.
Yes, I got points, sir.
Okay,
yes,
good.
Yeah, Professor, I have one query. I'm audible?
Yes,
I'm audible,
yes,
sir?
you are audible. You are audible.
Sir, can I ask one query related my doubts?
Of course.
Yeah, sir, what is the viewpoint of Noddings towards technology teaching learning process, online teaching learning process? What is the viewpoint of Nodding?
Well, I don't know about what she said specifically about online learning. I know that she was very concerned she was more concerned about getting carried away about strict quantitative assessment. I know that she was very concerned about that. Remember, she retired from teaching in 1998, so she probably didn't engage too much with online learning. Maybe she says something in an article somewhere there, but if I may answer a little bit from my own experience, and this is not necessarily speaking for Noddings, but since the pandemic, I have been teaching more online than previously, and so I had to work hard to create as much emphasis on care as I could in this two-dimensional technology that we have, and so for example, I built into my courses experiences where students could talk directly to one another visually through video, instead of just being on a screen with 50, 100 people on a Zoom. They would be talking to each other, so they would get a chance to see and experience one another that way. Also, again, care is built into the content on my classes, whether it's online or not. And I try to treat the students with care when they communicate with me or when I'm meeting with them. And so even if it's online, I do the best I can. You're absolutely, correct that if we could be in person, that raises the care profile, and that's important. But sometimes we can't. And but we can still try to do what we can to make the environment caring.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, now we are getting late due to the paucity of time. We have two more questions, Professor. Can we take, Professor, two more questions with your kind consent and kind
Sure.
consent of respected head, sir?
Of course.
Okay, Professor. One more question we have from Madame Teresa Sihi. You can ask, ma'am, your question directly to the professor. Ma'am Teresa?
Yes, I open. Yes,
ma'am.
about the natural caring and the ethical caring, you talk about the complexity, about the object, you classified with the object. But I think in the short words, what is natural caring? Just you do it without any difficulty. You just carry out, no trouble. This is a natural caring, including you care for the strangers. But what is ethical caring? I think ethical caring is you must do it with some efforts. Noddings said it clearly in the chapter 4 of the 1984, these classical works. And how do you think about this? I think in the words, classify it. Do it
yeah,
without
I think. Yes, I think.
Neha Chaudhary, kindly mute.
Participant, please unmute yourself.
Could you please mute yourself? Yeah, yes, Professor. Please, Professor. Sorry for inconvenience.
Oh yeah, no. I think generally speaking, Teresa, I think you're correct that it is much easier to engage in natural caring than it is to ethical caring. However, she also gives examples where, I mean, there's still, that doesn't mean just because it's easier doesn't mean it's always easy. And she gives the example, for example, when your baby cries in the middle of the night when you're sleeping, and so you might it is natural, you get up and you go tend to your baby when it's crying. It's still hard. You know, there's still a part of you that wants to sleep, but you get up and you do it anyway. And so natural caring, although much easier, is still not entirely easy. And you're exactly correct. Ethical caring usually takes a lot more work, a lot more imagination. And this is where, you know, we had some questions about maturity. If that maturity includes the development of relational skills, then we can make that ethical caring a little bit less hard. If we have that skill, if we have that experience, we make it a little bit less challenging. And that is, in some sense, that is the hope for the world, that we can do that we can bring care to the world, give people the skills, and maybe we can reduce some of the violence and the conflict in the world if we have the skills to try to understand one another and our across these differences. And so that's why I think of as care also as a very hopeful. It's a real gift you can give your students if you can give them the skills of caring, because then there's the opportunity to change the world. The book I'm working on now, I'm on the last chapter of this book, and it'll come out in 2024, is called Revolutionary Care. And what I'm arguing for is that we can all participate in an international revolution in small and big ways, if we can really value and make care a centerpiece of our lives.
Okay, ma'am, Ma'am Teresa, is it clear to you, ma'am? Do you have any question, ma'am?
Thank you very much. But just know the lady said about the organization. I think the Noddings wrote this opinion on the 2010, the maternal factors, that book. That's the problem about the care about. I just say it here. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much being with us. Professor, we have one more question from Ritu Sharma. Ritu Sharma, are you with us? Ritu Sharma. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Yes.
Good evening,
Yes,
sir.
Ritu Sharma. Yeah.
Sir, actually I lost my question because मैं एक बार log out हो गई थी. Again, I'm asking my question in my own words. Sir, there is a I want to ask that our perceptions, they're influenced by our social and cultural habits. So among research scholars, or in if we talk about the higher education students, there is a sense of disbelief in the students when they don't want to share their ideas. They don't want to share their ideas, and they have some sort of insecurity. So through the Nell Noddings care of ethics, how can we develop these things in the students so that we can develop a culture of creative environment there in our institutes?
Very important question. There's no simple answer for it, because what we're talking about is, is a relationship here. So with the students, and there can be all kinds of cultural differences. I even noticed just in the United States, because I've taught in different parts of the United States, that there are some very big differences in how students don't want to share their ideas in some places, and are very reluctant to participate. But I think it comes with a relationship of trust, right? And that takes time. I said there's a temporal dimension to care, and it's very true. You don't develop that kind of openness to one another easily. And there's a French term, disponibilité, which this idea of openness that I think is important to care. But you'll have to, respect a student. You'll have to listen to students over time and encourage them, but not, necessarily demand it of them. And hopefully in time, they will open up. Now, that's a struggle because we don't always have a lot of time in school. There's limited terms and we have limited exposure. But all we can do is try to develop those trust relationships. I think that's a term that hasn't been written enough about in terms of care ethics, is how important trust is. So there's no magic answer to that. It will take a lot of time, effort, creating that culture, so that the student will eventually, hopefully, feel comfortable to participate more.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Professor, we have last questions from Shilpa Yadav. Shilpa Yadav, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Good
yes,
evening,
Shilpa Yadav, you can ask your question.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Professor, I just want to ask that in India, today's NEP is about to placed, or it is in our education system. In today's situation, the vocational perspective of education, that the vocational utilization of education is focused. So how can we associate the philosophy of Noddings, ma'am, in today's education system, in the view of vocationalization of education?
Okay, so you're asking in term, because the focus is vocational. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Professor. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I had the good fortune of teaching at a community college. I was an administrator also at a community college in the United States, and that has a vocational emphasis as well. And I think that's fine. In fact, Noddings in places talks about how wonderful vocational training can be. What she's concerned about is vocational training that is so narrowly focused that it doesn't develop the individual. So even if you're, teaching somebody something that's very physical, like teaching them to fix cars or whatever, you still can have a caring culture in it. You still can spend some time talking about care and relational skills, even in that context. So yes, maybe those students will not have the opportunity to take a lot of philosophy or ethics as much as maybe some other kinds of students do. But that doesn't mean that care has to be absent. You know, giving those students respect, modeling the behavior of care for them. All those things can still take place within the context of vocational training.
Thank you, sir.
Professor. Thank you, Professor. Professor, before winding up question answer session, from my side, I have one question, Professor. Can I ask please to you?
Of course.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Professor, all of us in this call virtually from wherever we are connected, all of us are having the components of care within us. Everybody has the components of care, but sometimes all of us are, I also work in an organization, you are also working in an organization, Professor. All beings are working in organizations, but sometimes we get bound to our organizations, regulations, rules, norms, everything we need to get bound because we cannot go beyond. Sometimes we have some kind of fear where we are in the organization. So how do we bring out our caring component? It doesn't mean we do not have care. Every being has care. Everybody, the administrator, the vice chancellor, registrar, everybody in the organization, the dean, head, teachers, students, every being is having care. But how do we bring out that organic connections among each other to build better organizations, Professor? Because every being is having care. It doesn't mean Neil Noddings also point out the components of care. Every being is having care. But in spite of having care, sometimes we get bound to some set of things.
Sure.
So how do we come out, rise above and become more and more caring beings in terms of Neil Noddings? So this is my question, Professor. And Professor, you are also mentioning in your presentation some of the professors in United States of America's context that ego-driven professors, they focus more on the subject. But where Neil Nodding is saying student is important. So how do we see? And somewhere you are quoting, Professor, if you have two people in front of you, one is suppose I have my daughter and I have one caring being. So Neil Nodding saying in her words, she will pick up the caring being in spite of having her own daughter. So how do we bring these things into all of us? All of us are having care, but sometimes we bound to certain things. So how do you see, Professor, this perspective?
Yes, you're that was very well articulated question and an important question. And I completely agree with you. I mean, that was the point of my book, Embodied Care, that we all have capacity to care. And it's and we all share embodiment. So we have this baseline empathy for one another because we know what it's like to live in a body and other people. And so there's a powerful starting point. And yes, we get into these institutions, into these cultures, into these all kinds of different frameworks that limit our care. And even more than that, there are powerful social narratives that resist care, that can actively resist care. Certain certain forms of masculinity are very resistant to care. Certain forms of religion can be very resistant to care. Certainly capitalism can be very resistant to care. So there's all these narratives out there that are telling us not to care. And so it can be very difficult. And that's why in this book I'm working on, one of the things I want to talk about is how I think of care as a process theory, a process morality. And what I mean by that is this is a field in philosophy called process philosophy, but I want to apply it specifically to care because I think it's a situation where we will never be perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect caregiver. All we can do is try to improve, to get better at it, to get closer, to living this good life. And so this betterment is what we can strive for. You remember before I said I don't like to think of care as binary, as care or not care. I like to think of it as on a continuum. And all I can do, if I'm committed to care, and I think we should commit to care. I like this word commitment because commitment means it's coming from inside. It's me. I'm committing to care. It's not being imposed upon me. It's not my religion telling me I have to act a certain way. It's me deciding I want to commit to care. If we commit to care, then I think we're committing to a kind of improvement. Because as I said, we will never be perfect caregivers, but we can try our best to be better at it, to improve our skills, to improve our ability to listen attentively and humbly, to make empathetic connections to other people, to respond to other people and meet their needs. Those are things that we can try to improve upon. And so within these institutions, we do the best we can with the freedoms that we have in those institutions and try to, work within the system to do better. It can be hard. It's difficult. Caring is, sometimes we're exhausted and we need to engage in some self-care. But it's important. And I think it's important for the world. We see in the world a kind of crisis of care in many different fronts, in many different places. And we can't solve all the problems, but we can contribute to a better world. And I think that's what we can do.
Thank you very much for such an enlightening question answer session and discussions which you have with our esteemed participant professor. So it is a graceful evening to be having an interaction with you, Professor. This is truly delighted. Thank you. Over to Manisha Rani ma'am. Humble pranam. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for coordinating this question answer session. Before going to the next segment, here I want to share one thing with our participants. I don't know whether they know it or not. Our eminent speaker of this event, Professor Hamington, today wake up around, I think, 4 a.m. morning, if I'm not wrong, Professor. And the way you connected yourself with us itself is a great reflection of caring. So thank you so much, Professor. So
thank you.
Right now we are in the last segment of our program, and here I would like to invite Dr. Rashmi Srivastava from School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, India, to propose vote of thanks. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Manisha ma'am. I am audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening and good morning, participants from all over the world. First of all, I, Dr. Rashmi Srivastava, coordinator of the program and assistant professor, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, show my pleasure and gratitude to present a formal vote of thanks on the behalf of School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, in this virtual platform for the international seminar on Noddings on care, ethics, and pedagogy, Reimagining education. Firstly, I would like to thank our respected and dynamic Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Anand Prakash Ji, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar, for his blessing, motivation, and continuous support. Sir, your motivation is the backbone of this program. Without your support, we cannot organize such international program. So thank you so much for your kind support and motivation. I also want to support my heartfelt thanks to our respected Professor Ashish Srivastav, Dean, School of Education, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, for your guidance, care, support. Thank you so much, sir. Next, I would like to my great thanks to our guest of the day, Dr. Maurice Hamington, Portland State University, Portland, USA, for his valuable time in his busy schedule. So in this regard, sir, you nicely explain the meaning of care and ethics. Respected sir, your presentation was extremely wonderful. You share all the details of Nell Nodding life, books, method of teaching, extra. You nicely explain the difference between natural care and ethical care. You discuss the current issues and challenges to the related care education. You explain all the pillar of care related to the Nell Nodding, modeling, dialogue, practice. You said caring is not only important for the human being, it is also important for all the living being. Care is for self, care for others. We must start care from home. Respected sir, you nicely explain the importance of 7C: choice, critical thinking, caring, connection, coordination, connectivity, creativity in life. Sir, I have no word for you, for your presentation, for your support. Thank you so much, sir, for your input, your valuable time, your presentation. Really, it is very helpful for our student and all or the participants who are in this program. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Moving on, I would like my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Mukesh Kumar, Head, Department of Educational Studies, Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Bihar. Sir, you always encourage us to do more and more, and your positive support provide us to confidence to complete the task successfully. Thank you so much, sir. I also want to give my sincere thanks to Dr. Pathlot Omkar to handling the question answer session, and Dr. Manisha Rani madam for his anchoring and his rigorous hard work and support. Many thanks, ma'am and sir. Next, I want to show my blessings to the core of my heart for the program organizer, my doctoral research scholar, Mr. Manish Kumar. I want to congratulate you on this for this event. As supervisor, as PhD supervisor, I feel proud of you. You really deserve many more. So thank you and congratulate you. Next, I want to give my heartfelt thanks to all the participants from India and abroad, faculty members, dear research scholars, participants, those who joined this international seminar. Your precious presence enriched the quality of program. Last but not the least, I want to give my heartfelt thanks to all the people who directly, indirectly support organizing this international event. We Indian always believe in Upanishad Shlok, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya. The meaning of this slok, may everyone be happy. This is the core of ethics. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Over to you, Manisha ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
So much. So here I request all the participants kindly on your videos so we can take one group photograph. Please kindly take the photograph.
Yes, ma'am.
Manish, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible.
Okay. Okay. So
Yes, ma'am, audible.
So now I request all the participants kindly stand up in their places for national anthem.
मैंने भी खड़े होके अपना
Thank you all. So with the permission of our head, sir,
Okay, madam, please conclude.
Sir, we wind up.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, participants.
Thank you, Professor.
All over the world. Thank you so much.
It was great to be here. It was wonderful.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Professor.
sir. Thank you.
Madam
Thank you,
Teresa,
Professor Maurice,
thank
sir. Thank
you
you.
very much. Pranam.